In the heart of the Masai Mara, beneath the cool shadows of Muziara Marsh, as the morning mist still lingered above the ground, two male lions rested among their pride, Simba and Blondie, the kings of the Marsh Pride. For years they had ruled these lands, some of the most fertile in the Mara, rising grasses, abundant water, and consistent migration patterns. Everything favored their pride, and the architects of this prosperity were these two leaders.
Simba was the older of the coalition. His mane was thick, his gaze deep and steady. His calm demeanor was evidence of the many battles he had fought. Blondie, on the other hand, was younger and more aggressive. Quick-tempered, he was always first to confront any threat. Yet their true strength lay not in their differences, but in their unity. For years, they had fought shoulder to shoulder. They covered each other's weaknesses. Together, they had built Marsh Pride into one of Mara's largest prides. The females of the pride were numerous: Wide-Eye, Lispy, Red, Bibi. Each cared for her own cubs while contributing to the pride's survival through hunting and raising the next generation. It was a family, but the destiny of a lion family is always drawn by the strength of its males, and in the Mara, no male could remain strong forever. Muziara Swamp, early morning. A pack of hyenas, drawn by the scent of a kill, had gathered at the edge of the marsh. But danger crept in silently. When Simba and Blondie appeared, panic erupted. The hyenas scattered, but one got stuck in the mud. It thrashed and struggled, but it was no use. Blondie lunged. The hyena fought back, biting Blondie's face. Teeth sank deep into the hyena's neck, sending a clear message across the Mara: this land is still ours. One night, a low, ominous growl echoed through the darkness, changing the pride's future. It was a buffalo attack. Blondie, as usual, was at the front line. During the hunt, an old but still dangerous bull buffalo targeted him. The collision was swift, but its effect was lasting. Blondie collapsed to the ground from a sudden strike of the buffalo's horn. He did not rise again. When the morning sun rose over Muziara Marsh, the pride was left with only one king, Simba. But Simba was growing old. Could he carry the burden of the entire pride alone? Usually, when a lion is left alone, he abandons his pride and becomes a nomad. Yet Simba did not leave. He chose to stay, standing alone for his pride. And perhaps his greatest battle was just beginning. As the yellow grasses of the Masai Mara swayed gently in the morning wind, two silhouettes appeared from beyond the Muziara swamp. Their bodies were broad, their manes not yet fully grown, but their eyes held an unwavering ambition. They were Notch and Lightmane, the two new young males. Their arrival was more than a mere territorial invasion. It was a sign that the era of Simba's reign was drawing to a close. After the death of his coalition partner, Blondie, during a buffalo hunt in 2003, Simba had been left alone. For years, he had protected the Marsh Pride by himself, raised its cubs, and watched over its lionesses. But now he was tired.
and for a lone lion, that meant death. The first few days passed with nothing more than stare-downs. Notch and Lightmane patrolled the border, testing Simba's reaction. With the wisdom of years, Simba watched them from a distance. He knew what they were going to do. He himself had come to power in the same way. Then the pressure mounted. The pair crept closer to the Pride. Their roars tore through the silence of Musiara. But Simba still stood his ground. They confronted each other a few times. Simba roared. He wanted to show them that he was still standing, that his name still echoed across these lands. But Notch and Lightmane did not back down. Simba was left with no choice. Two young, aggressive males were determined to end his rule. The lionesses stayed back, away from the confrontation. The cubs were hidden in the bushes. Simba faced these two young nomads alone. This wasn't a war, but it was the end of a reign. With years of experience, Simba understood. This fight would be his end. His aging body could not withstand their youthful muscle. Notch and Lightmane began to chase him, exiling the old king from the Marsh Pride. Simba retreated. Days later, a body was found lying silently among the rocks of Rhino Ridge. It was Simba. He had been mortally wounded by his young rivals. It was the end of an era. The Marsh Pride now belonged to its new masters. When the new kings walked into the Pride, everything changed. The other lionesses quickly accepted them. But one was different. Bibi. Bibi had sensed Simba's fall. She took her cubs and left the Pride, prepared to live alone for a long time. Every day she protected her cubs, hid them, and kept them far from the new males. She did everything to protect them. But life had other plans. But it didn't last. Bibi eventually rejoined the Pride, perhaps thinking the danger had passed. But she was wrong. Simba's bloodline stood no chance under Notch's rule. And soon enough, two cubs disappeared. No one saw exactly what happened, but everyone knew Notch and Lightmane's first act had been to erase the traces of the past. The new order was now established. Notch and Lightmane were the true owners of the Marsh Pride. Cubs were born, lionesses hunted, and life went on. But in that year, it wasn't only the past that was erased. The future was also being written. Because it was during this very time that 5 lions who would change the destiny of the Masai Mara were born. Notch 2, Long, Ron, Caesar, and Grimace. They were tiny bodies then, but something was born within them. The will to rule. They were not just cubs, they were heirs, leaders, and kings. They were the cornerstones of the most powerful coalition that would leave its mark on the history of the Masai Mara. The winds of change had shifted. These lands were preparing to learn the weight of their paws. Morning was quiet in the Masai Mara. The sky was gray, the wind uneasy. A stillness held over the swamp, but something was changing. Months had passed since Notch and Light Mane began their reign over the Marsh Pride. Power had settled, and a new order was in place. The hunts were plentiful, the lionesses at peace. Or so it seemed.
But you can't stay at the top for long in the Mara.
That morning, Notch was at the heart of the pride, resting with the lionesses while the cubs wandered nearby. Light Mane, however, was on duty. He was likely on a patrol route, scanning the territory for potential threats. He was the other half of the coalition, silent but indispensable. And then it happened. 3 lions appeared on the horizon. Romeo, Claude, and Pavarotti. Young, strong, and eager, they advanced silently from the edges of the Paradise Plains. They didn't roar. They didn't intimidate. They simply approached, like hunters, calculated. Light Mane spotted them too late, or perhaps he had seen them earlier, but he did not retreat. The territory belonged to Notch. The pride was in their charge, and Light Mane was not made to run. There was no avoiding the clash. No one knows the details. But the next morning, the silence of the guides said it all. Light Mane was dead. Light Mane, Notch's only coalition partner. Together they had seized the Marsh Pride, driven out Simba, and torn down the old order. But now, Notch was alone. He walked alone across the same lands they had patrolled together just weeks before. He was living the very fate of his predecessor, Simba. That moment left a void in the Mara. The coalition was now just a single lion. But this did not mean Notch would withdraw. No, Notch did not retreat. On the contrary, he began to act with a new resolve. He needed to step up even more. He stayed closer to the lionesses. He asserted more dominance over the cubs. His roar echoed from the swamp all the way to Fig Tree Ridge. He was now a lone ruler, and this loneliness made him even more vigilant. With the death of Light Mane, an era in the Masai Mara had ended, but a king's war had just begun. Notch was now a solitary ruler, and in the Mara loneliness spreads like the scent of blood on the wind. The lionesses of the pride were as capable as ever. The kill they brought down was a royal feast. By tradition, the first bite, the lion's share, belonged to him. All eyes were on Notch, but his eyes weren't on the feast. They were fixed on the horizon. His body stood among the pride, but his soul was already patrolling the borders. Because in this land, the smallest mistake of a king is paid for by the most innocent. And there they were, like ghosts from the past. 2 young, powerful, ambitious nomads. They had seen the one crack in Notch's kingdom, his solitude. He sensed the danger immediately. Without hesitation, he left the pride and walked out alone to face them. Notch knew from experience, a reckless attack would be suicide. This wasn't just a fight between males. It was a war for the future. If he were wounded, he wouldn't be able to defend his pride. If he lost, His cubs would be slaughtered that very day. So he didn't attack. This wasn't fear, it was strategy. He lay down, calm and composed, as if to say, "I'm at ease." His massive body and rippling muscles spoke louder. "If you push me, you'll pay the price." This was no act of submission. It was psychological warfare. Then suddenly, he struck. A test charge, meant to measure their resolve. But the young males didn't flinch. They stepped in closer, calling his bluff. The moment for restraint was over. Notch exploded forward, unleashing the raw fury of a seasoned king. He chased them with a power born of purpose, forcing them back, his strength undeniable. His strategy had worked. He had pushed back the threat without a scratch, preserving his cubs' lives for one more day. But even that victory couldn't erase a bitter truth. The winds of the Mara were whispering something new. The king of the Marsh Pride was alone, and that meant more challengers were on their way. The danger had passed. The borders were safe. The battle was over, and the king rested. Alone in the cool shade of a bush, Notch believed he had found peace, if only for a day. But in the Mara, peace is often just the quiet before the next storm. And this storm came with a beautiful face. She was a young lioness, slipping silently through the brush. Her name was Tamu. Likely a distant relative of the Marsh Pride queens, but that bloodline hadn't earned her a place among them. She was the outsider, the one never welcomed. Now, for the first time in her life, she was coming into heat, and her instincts led her to the strongest male around, Notch. Without hesitation, she approached the massive king and brushed up against him, her intentions unmistakable. It was a bold step to change her fate. The black-maned giant before her was both an ideal mate and her only hope of survival. Notch, the lone ruler, was caught off guard by her audacity. Tamu's courage, her beauty, her timing, all struck a chord in the king. In that moment, borders and threats vanished. Instinct took control. The king answered her call. He rubbed his mane against a tree, as if combing his hair for a date, and followed her. He looked to the distance. The queens of the Marsh Pride stood some 400 meters away, dangerously close. But Notch didn't care. The pull of the lioness beside him outweighed any risk. And then they mated. But the sounds of their union traveled with the wind, reaching the ears of the queens. This wasn't just jealousy. It was a challenge to their rule, a threat to their authority. Enraged, the queens charged in the direction of the noise, as if to warn her, "Stay away from our male." Tamu saw them coming and didn't hesitate. She turned and ran for her life. Notch, caught in the act, froze, but he wasn't ready to let her go. His own queens weren't an estrus, and this new connection was too strong to ignore. After a brief pause, the king turned away from his queens and chased after Tamu. Under the burning sun, he followed her trail. The queens gave up the pursuit, but Notch didn't. Far from the pride, hidden from judgment, he found her again. For nearly 2 days, they mated in solitude. It was the start of a love story and of a coming tragedy.
Notch's epic journey will continue in the next episode, right where it left off.